We are at the absolute dawn of this.
When people talk about sea level rise, they don't talk about people like us.
The entire military capability of the major nations is going to be replaced with autonomous weapons.
Machines are making more and more decisions on their own every day. And the technology behind that is changing navigation, exploration, and even the nature of war.
By land, by air, and by sea, weapons of war are taking on more autonomy, able to choose and strike targets on their own, and raising new questions of ethics and conflict. The decisions made right now by governments around the world will decide how war is waged for the rest of the 21st century. The big question is, who do we want pulling the trigger? Man or machine?
In a mission like the one we are in, where we have about an hour to explore a multi-kilometer long underground environment and caves. The time is so short, the range is so high. Relying on a human to handle the whole thing goes beyond the cognitive load that human can handle. More than 95% of the mission is autonomous. This is Team CoStar, collaborative subterranean autonomous robots. We are here with our team preparing for the next round of competition in DARPA Subterranean Challenge tomorrow. We have 4 robots here in this test course.
So could you sort of walk us through what the robot is processing right now?
Absolutely. So there are different layers of the system. In the lowest layer, there's control and stability of the system that is done mainly by the company, Boston Dynamics. Then you see the payload on the robot that does the autonomy behavior. And that part is our contribution from NASA's JPL that basically has a sensing component. And at the back of the system, you see the communication nodes that enables various robots, different robots, to talk to each other and allocate tasks among themselves autonomously.
Can we talk a little bit about the applications for these robots?
So for us, the main ultimate goal is exploring subsurface voids and caves in planetary bodies. But in addition, these technologies have a lot of application in terrestrial settings, like search and rescue, finding survivors after natural disasters, and so on. So DARPA creates a lot of opportunities and creates these competitions that creates a culture and vibe that expedites development of technologies. For example, look back to the DARPA challenge around self-driving cars between 2004 to 7, right? 10 years, 15 years down the road, a lot of companies are looking into autonomous car that was basically initiated in a DARPA challenge. So their impact is way beyond just, one specific application.
Specifically military.
Exactly.
Hello and welcome to DARPA's Subterranean Challenge to build autonomous systems that can rapidly map, navigate, and search complex underground environments to better aid and support our first responders and warfighters in places where it may not be safe for humans to go.
Team CoStar from NASA is one of 10 teams in this autonomous robotics competition hosted by DARPA. That's the U.S. government's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The challenge draws some of the world's most brilliant human minds in autonomous robotics and gives their teams 1 hour to track down as many key items as possible in a complex underground environment. The tech put on show here in this competition for funding will go toward all sorts of missions. But there's also a reason that funding comes out of the U.S. defense budget.
So the Sub-T Challenge is all about discovering whole new technologies that will help us map, explore, and search underground environments. And so here at the urban circuit, we're really interested in the complex urban environments, and that ranges from subway tunnels to shopping mall parking garages to an unfinished nuclear power plant.
So obviously it takes a lot to organize all this. What does DARPA and U.S. national security stand to benefit from this kind of competition?
DARPA is really interested in breakthrough technologies and breakthrough capabilities and finding wherever those technologies might reside. The types of technologies that we're discovering here in the Sub-T Challenge range from being able to generate maps that are detailed enough so that you know where hazards might be, to finding artifacts which represent the types of things that warfighters need to know before going into harm's way. That could be everything from things that they're trying to find, or it could be things that they're trying to avoid. And so for safety and security purposes, that's really where Sub-T Challenge kind of comes together.
Anytime you have the conversation about autonomous technology for military applications, there's that hot topic question of ethics and regulations. Are those concerns something that you take into account when you're figuring out which technologies, which autonomous technologies to invest in and bring into a military application?
I think those types of considerations should be at the core of a lot of the research that goes on in autonomy and robotic systems. We provide a rather complex test bed to go and really stress test. I mean, how are these types of autonomous systems going to work in real-world settings so that we can appreciate and better understand how we should develop and design those systems so that they're safe and then can operate in reliable and desirable manners.
Autonomous robotics have tremendous potential for good in our world and in exploring other worlds. But this question of how that tech is used for military purposes is one that has troubled experts studying science and ethics for years now. With the introduction of drones, submarines, guns, and ground vehicles that can navigate war zones and fire on enemies without direct human supervision. Some of these weapons are even capable of selecting their own targets. Most of the world's major military powers are actively developing or buying up the technology that powers these autonomous weapons systems. That includes the US and, specifically, DARPA, which, in addition to hosting robotics challenges, also runs its own field experiments, deploying swarms of autonomous air and ground vehicles to demonstrate raids on urban environments. And the questions around the ethics and safety of weapons programmed for warfare are only becoming more relevant as this technology becomes more intelligent.
AI systems have surpassed human capabilities in a number of areas where the systems know the rules perfectly. So checkers was probably the first, and then chess in '97 when Deep Blue defeated Kasparov. And then in 2016, we saw Go, which some people predicted would take another 100 years. These are problems where the decision-making is difficult for human beings, but it still satisfies certain properties that make it easy for machines. So the world, namely the Go board or the chess board, is fixed, finite. The machine can see all of it, and the rules are perfectly known. And the real world doesn't satisfy any of those properties. So the way we've built AI since the beginning is that we essentially create machinery that optimizes an objective, that comes up with the best possible way of achieving the objective. And then we feed the objective into it. And we've known actually for thousands of years this is a really, really bad design. King Midas was functioning with that model in mind when he said, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. When you look at what's happened on social media, where we've got AI algorithms that are trying to optimize a fixed objective, which is click-through or revenue generation of some kind, we see that that's really messed up our world already, and those are pretty stupid algorithms. The Terminator series is fun to watch, and it's thought-provoking. In fact, the problem we have with autonomous weapons has nothing to do with them turning evil or turning conscious. It's just that what an autonomous weapon is a weapon that can kill people without individual human supervision of each attack on humans. If you don't have to have individual supervision, then you can do as much of it as you want. Simply by buying more hardware and launching weapons by the thousand or the million, you can cause damage on a scale that previously only nuclear weapons could achieve. Anonymous assassination services would become widespread, all the way up to attacks on the genocidal scale.
Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free.
I thought then, yeah, this is what we need for autonomous weapons. We need a short film that illustrates why autonomous weapons are a bad idea. What life would be like if these weapons are developed and sold on a large scale. It used to be that if you wanted to kill millions of people, the only way you could do it would be to be a nation state. And for that reason, we have a whole system of international controls to keep nation states from doing that. And we try very hard to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of anybody but a small number of nation states. So with autonomous weapons, that changes. ISIS, at some point, I believe, had a revenue of about $1 billion a month. So that buys 20 million autonomous weapons a month. So you would see the possibility that non-state actors, for the first time, could be wielding weapons of mass destruction against nation states. One container, the kind of thing that you see driving around on trucks, can contain about 1 million lethal weapons. So you could take out everyone in Manhattan from a single container.
It's time to launch negotiations to ban killer robots. Support the call to ban killer robots.
Today I'll be asking people what they think about autonomy in warfare, whether they think it's a good idea to hand a lethal decision over to a robot like this.
StopKillerRobots.org. Join #TeamHuman.
How's everything? Good? Great. Welcome to Times Square. Welcome to Times Square.
It's called David Rackham. I call it IT.
You call it IT?
Yeah, it's.
You don't call him by his name.
So today we are bringing David Rackham around to all of the big tech companies that are doing particularly problematic work around potentially contributing to lethal autonomous weapons and raising awareness for the people who are working inside to know that they can join us and that they can have a voice.
More than 200 companies have pledged not to develop killer robots. Microsoft, why haven't you? Amazon, why haven't you?
We did killer robots to get people to pay attention. If you say lethal autonomous robotic weapon systems, you barely get it out of your mouth and the people would keep walking.
So how does the campaign define a killer robot?
Allowing the machine itself to be both weapon and combatant, because the machine takes the target decision and it's also the weapon that carries out the kill.
It's that combination of the selecting and identifying of the target and then the use of force against it, lethal or otherwise, that when put together, we object to.
So what are the countries coming closest to what you're describing?
United States, Russia, China, Israel, South Korea, maybe Turkey. The US is vocal about wanting to stop discussion at the UN about banning killer robots. They don't even want regulations. It was essentially the US that had a big hand in stopping any activity inside the UN negotiations. And so when the smaller and mid-sized countries came together, it was finally governments coming together and saying, we don't have to wait for these people.
More than 2 decades ago, Jody Williams and Mary Wareham led the charge to ban landmines, leading to an international treaty and a Nobel Peace Prize for the campaign. Today, they're on another mission for another treaty, because unlike landmines, nuclear weapons, and chemical weapons, there's no global set of laws or codes on the development or use of autonomous weapons yet.
It's time to launch negotiations to ban killer robots.
There are not yet negotiations, and this is why we are here, is to call for the launch of negotiations on the treaty to ban killer robots and retain meaningful human control over the use of force. What we see is strong support across the developing world for the goal of creating new law, creating a new treaty, but we know it has to be a global effort. At the last diplomatic meeting in August, Russia and the United States were the key problems. They did not want to see any result.
While the heavyweight nations in UN diplomacy kick the killer robot can down the road, weapons with autonomous capabilities have entered the battlefield in a new way. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over part of their Central Asian region is decades old. But in 2020, Azerbaijan introduced these. This is video from Azerbaijan's Ministry of Defense showing what's known as loitering munitions. Basically, drones that fly in a holding pattern in an area until they're given a target, then find their own way to the enemy and detonate. These are man-in-the-loop weapons, meaning a controller will give them a target to attack and the drone will pursue it. But similar products marketed by the Israeli manufacturer are capable of finding and targeting enemy radar systems on their own. Open source analysis shows us how Azerbaijan has been using these Israeli drones, as seen by studying images from the wreckage of drones shot down by Armenia, with unique Harap drone parts, like the wing hinges in the wreckage matching up with promotional imagery from the Israeli state-owned manufacturer. These are just one example of one of the loitering munitions used in this conflict. Other types documented in this war include the Israeli-made Sky Striker, and an Azeri-produced version of the Israeli Orbiter 2M. And footage of the drone's attacks call to mind the autonomous slaughter bots that Stuart Russell warned of.
Many people have talked about autonomous weapons as the third revolution in warfare. So there was gunpowder, nuclear weapons, and now autonomous weapons. So I think autonomous weapons in the hands of the major military powers are likely to be used in pretty much all of the major theaters of war. The entire military capability of the major nations is going to be replaced with largely autonomous weapons, or semi-autonomous. Nonetheless, I do see progress, first of all, in understanding why autonomous weapons need to be controlled. I think there's an increasing consensus on that point. You don't want to have increasingly intelligent AI systems pursuing fixed objectives, because those objectives invariably will leave out something that we care about and we won't realize until it's too late that it's gone.